Welcome to the 2-minute warning interview, a series where we highlight the tick-tock of the global climate clock, and that it's louder than ever, and that our window to achieve effective mitigation against the negative impacts of climate change is narrowing far faster than we are acting. Truly, the pressure is on, and for those who are not yet feeling it, they really should be. The real trick is finding the balance between this economic growth and environmental protection, and doing so very, very soon. Of course, that's a very simplified version, and we're going to get into a bit more detail of that. My name is 𝗦𝗧𝗜𝗠𝗟. I'm the director of the Energy Transition Dialogue at Gulf Intelligence, and I am very, very glad to have Anne Rosenberg with me today. Anne is the Senior Vice President for Sustainable Development at Wood, and she also has many other titles and accolades that you can find listed on her website. Hi, Anne.
Hi, and thank you so much for the opportunity. I'm so excited to be part of this.
No, we're very, very glad to have you with us. So thank you very much. Let's start with a simple yet deeply complex question, just to keep things easy. The question is, what must the energy industry prioritize in 2021 to accelerate its decarbonisation? We know that the global momentum for a lower carbon world is gaining speed. Some may say finally, you know, with an exasperated sigh. And we know that fossil fuel industries are trying to find their footing, and that many are really trying to make the right effort. But the task is so massive, absolutely beyond comprehension almost. And we know that demand for energy is rising overall, and we know that the types of energy we want are increasingly diverse, and with that it brings its own opportunities and its own challenges. So against this rather multifaceted background, what would you say that the energy industry must prioritize this year, because that clock is ticking very loudly, to really keep going with this decarbonisation journey? And do you think it's going fast enough?
So first of all, I think the number one thing that needs to be prioritized is to go out and put up a very strong commitment and an ambition for what you want to achieve. And this is what we see in a super accelerated way, that companies in the oil and gas industry are going out with huge commitments. They're going out with, you know, a net zero to 2050. So that's the first thing to do. When you ask me if I think you go fast enough, I think this whole conversation has been an ongoing conversation for many, many years. So you can say, why do we believe that it is now? And do we think, as you said, is it going fast enough? I think what 2021 have shown, because of what we have been through in 2020 with COVID, and are still, you know, in the post-COVID world that we live in, I think urgency means something totally different. And that's why I have been excited to see, I think 2021 is a historical year, of course, because of the whole thing around vaccine and COVID, but also because the commitment to climate have never been bigger. We saw the year was kicked off by US rejoined the Paris Agreement. At World Economic Forum in January, 75% of all the conversations was around climate. We saw the UN Global Compact came out with an updated strategy where climate was the key thing. We saw all Larry Fink's CEO letter that came out also in January. Not to forget Bill Gates' book, How to Avoid Climate Disaster. And we are still just in January. And when we hit into February, we again saw an explosion of conversations and events, everything leading up to COP26. And so this week, as you know, is Earth Day, and you know that Joe Biden are inviting more than 40 world leaders to come together the 22nd, 23rd to speak about climate and net zero. So I think the timing right now is interesting. The accelerating is really key, what is happening. And you cannot see any news or read anything without there's a conversation about climate. So I think number one, when you ask me what is the most important thing, is to get your ambition, your target set. Secondly, is that you define a roadmap, because this is a long journey you are going on. So there needs to be a lot of structure. You need to have a governance in place. And then you need to really begin to look at technology, clean tech, to help you to implement all the changes that you need to do in your business.
And on those goals, because like you say, with the plethora of net zero targets from the world's biggest economies, as well as some of the world's biggest companies, and it's a huge step change. But I think and I'm sure you'll know more about this, but there's a concern that the devil's in the details, and we're talking, your second point was about creating those roadmaps and having those detailed steps in place. And there's already a sense of nervousness that isn't being done fast enough. Do you think people are being realistic in their timetables? Do you think that those who say we should already have roadmaps being crafted now, these world leading economies should be pushing ahead with these, do you think that they're asking for too much, considering the goals have been set and now the roadmaps take a little bit of time? Do you think that they're asking for too much, or do you think that they are right and that the roadmap should be happening faster?
I think we need to look at what is it actually we are in the process of doing. And if we go a little bit back in history, and I'm a science fiction writer, and I think right now scenario planning is key, science fiction mindset scenario planning, because when you go in and you set a net zero goal for 2050, and you define a roadmap for this, of course you don't know what you don't know how to get to 2050. You just know you have the ambition to do so. And this is where scenario planning is really, really key for what you're going to do. And you can say the world that we live in today, and this is also what COVID have learned us, we were able to come up with vaccines in such a short time that before COVID, nobody will have believed that could be possible to do.
And cynics aside, it's extremely impressive.
Right?
Yeah,
exactly right. So what we see now with climate and the big challenge we have in front of us is that if the companies are coming together, public-private partnership have never been stronger. And if we look at technology, I've been working with technology for more than 20 years, and we live in a world now where you can do anything you want with technology. We have everything in hands to build new solutions, to define things in new ways. So you can say we have what we need of technology. We will just accelerate going forward exponentially. So we as people of this world now need to come up with new ideas to how we can create energy going forward. And then we should just look at this journey that we are all on, is that it's a digital transformations, and companies have done digital transformation for years, right? Companies have, and that's why I love history. If you go, I wrote a science fiction book that came out for 2 years ago, and it actually turned into a historical book which talks about what we faced for 100 years ago, where the world was different, of course, as it is today, but it was big challenges at that time, just like we have big challenges today. And we as human beings have a way to evolve over time. And this is exactly what is happening now, is that we live in 2021, we have all the technology we need at hand. We learned from COVID how to do really strong public-private partnership collaboration. We know what ambition means, because with COVID, we had an ambition, we need a vaccine. And
there was pressure.
Exactly, the pressure. And the world had become very focused on data, because that's what we live by now. That's what we live, what brought us through the whole COVID situation, right? So I think when we talk about this roadmap to 2050 to be net zero, we talk about a digital transformation. Companies are used to that, where you use the ESG, the net zero ambition target, as design principles across all line of businesses. And you go in and you build a strong governance structure. So I'm an advisor at World Economic Forum in the work group about climate and how you build up strong governance structures. And so the key is really to go in and say, how do I go in my business? I set up the ambition, net zero by 2050. How do I go and change my business model? How do I implement that across all my line of businesses? And how do I build a roadmap that I really am accountable for, not just to this year, not just next year, but until 2050. So for me, it's about structure and really work towards this ambition.
And that's the only way of achieving that scope 3, which is,
Exactly.
you know, so far off right now. It's not even, it's right, it's a dot on the horizon right now.
Exactly.
Scope 3.
It's like, when Kennedy said we're going to the moon, right? It's like we have an ambition. When you have an ambition, you keep your eye on that ambition, and that's what you do. Yeah.
And at the moment, the moon is scope 3.
Yeah.
And moving towards it. You've mentioned clean tech, and then you mentioned digital then as well. And I'd really like to go more into that and saying that all the technologies that we really do need are essentially at hand already. And that's something echoed by the International Energy Agency as well, saying the level of tech that we do need is here. It's also the commercialization and the scaling up, and those seem to be the areas that need a lot more attention. And just one figure that really stands out to me is that up to 25% of the operational and capital expenditure of a barrel of oil can be cut using digital tools and analytics. That's a McKinsey statistic. And I just find that fascinating, especially in this lower for longer world where these energy companies, oil and gas, let's say specifically, are getting pressured by lower for longer oil prices, the energy transition, the COVID workplace, and geopolitics, you know, and then all the array of traditional pressure points that they've always had as well. And having that sort of economic saving per barrel of oil, arguably they would take that 25% and allocate it to something on the energy transition and a lower growth trajectory as well, and to help them on that side. Do you see that happening? Do you see these sorts of companies saying we can save X, Y, Z on our traditional energy processes, and we can use those savings to accelerate our low carbon? Are you seeing that allocation happening?
Absolutely, and I am seeing a huge shift happening, and I just want to first of all, yes, I see that, and I just wanted to talk a little bit about the technology that you touched on. So I created together with UN Global Compact the SDG ambition, and which is a framework, and it's 10 ambitions to help the private sector to become sustainable companies.
And this was launched in January 2020, wasn't it?
Exactly, yeah.
This is pre-COVID. It was just
pre-COVID, and exactly. And there's actually there's some exciting things about this SDG ambition, because every year the UN have the High Political Forum, and in 2019 in the summer, I was together with 𝗧𝗘𝗓𝗠𝗠, who was at that time the CEO of UN Global Compact, and we the High Political Forum just came out at UN and said, you know, even though we do so much, at that time the 17 global goals have been out for 5 years, we don't see the needle move. We don't see things are really improving. And because I come from SAP and have done big SAP implementation all over the world, I was also kind of thinking, you know, at that time I was running a huge innovation space in New York City, Hudson Yard, and I was speaking with clients every single day. And I saw all this commitment from companies, but I could also at the same time see that even though you commit, you want to do something, you want, you know, circular, you know, whatever is in the energy or whatever it is across the 17 global goals, I could see that nobody was really changing processes, was changing business models, was changing the way you use technology, was changing the reporting. And then there was a trend that companies begin to communicate, like do marketing campaigns that they did really well within sustainability, but everything in between, nothing was really happening. So that
they thought it could be an add-on rather than an internal rework.
In add-on, nice. It was nice to talk about, but it was not really the key. So the SDG ambition is really, and I'll just show it right here in front of you here. The SDG ambition is actually a framework. It took 2 years to build this. So it's a framework which talks about how you incorporate your sustainability strategy into your vision mission statement. Make sure that your board actually have knowledge around sustainability. Your executive management have, when you do your key reporting, you report up against the 17 global goals. And then your whole, I call it the backbone, the business model of your company, like your supply chain processes, the way you produce product, the way you purchase products, all your employees in your company, how you invest as a company, all of that sustainability is embedded into it. And also how you communicate about your company, your stakeholder engagement, and so on and so forth. And then we also realized that when you look at the 17 global goals, they are really, really meant to the public sector, to governments, to countries. And therefore, for the private sector to implement them, they were struggling. Yes. So that's the reason why we took the 17 global goals, some of the most known sustainability frameworks, and then we built the 10 business benchmarks. And 1.5 is one of those benchmarks that is very known.
It's easy to understand. It's standardized.
Exactly, yeah. And so we came out with that. We at a general assembling at World Economic Forum, at general assembling, we launched it over 2 years. And now the whole framework is out. Thousands of companies have signed up by UN Global Compact. But it was interesting when you say it was before COVID, because it was at Davos that I was together with the Secretary General in January 2020. We launched the framework, and then 1 month afterwards, the whole world was just like with COVID, right?
Yeah.
And I remember there was so much conversation around, you know, what is now happening with the 17 global goals, what is happening with the SDG ambition, because the world, of course, was you know, because of COVID.
But we know from the last financial crisis as well, there was a retraction with the climate policy and climate investments.
Exactly.
Happened. And I think there was fear, wasn't there, that we were going to see that last year.
Yeah. But what really happened was that it just accelerated it. And that's why we saw that even though climate was with Greta Thunberg and was all the things at World Economic Forum in the beginning of 2020, but it just accelerated the whole thing from being something we talk about to something we now do big commitments and net zero roadmap, measurement, and so on and so forth. But going back to the technology that we talked about, is that in this whole work that we did during the 2 years, we realized two things. Point number one is that if you want to do carbon reporting, it's super difficult, because the data that you need to collect from the underlying technology, for the underlying systems, historically has been something we did not report on, and the systems did not support it. But that's the reason why a lot of companies are struggling now to do carbon reporting. And actually this week I am together with Microsoft. They have a big Envision event where we are launching a product called Envision, which is a carbon reporting dashboard together with Microsoft. And so right now, a lot of the technology companies, together with engineering companies like Wood, are coming out with carbon reporting dashboards to do measurement. Okay,
which we didn't have 15 years ago when everybody was saying we needed to start pricing carbon.
No,
we didn't have that technology.
No. And even for 2 years ago, we didn't. Even for 1 year ago, we didn't. We of course we have dashboards, but we did not look at things from the sustainability lens, the climate lens. And even though we did, we couldn't take the data up in real time. So that so that we're getting solved now. So I always say that 2020 was the year where we begin to look into different ESG frameworks. 2021 is the year where we begin to do reporting. But then the most important thing, exciting thing I see is when you know where you are and how big the gap is, for example, if you're committed to 1.5 that all are committing to, then you need to begin to do something about it, right? And that's the roadmap onto 2050 or 2045. And this is where today, when we did this SDG ambition, we found out across all the 17 global goals with this 10 business benchmark for the private sector, there's a 35% technology gap. If you go into the whole area around climate, there's a 70% technology gap. 70%? Yes.
Gosh, that's a big...
Exactly. And then you ask yourself, okay, so who's going to, what are we going to do about this?
Who's going to fill it?
So what is super exciting now, and that's the reason why I now work for Wood, is that you need to go into the engineering companies where you have domain expertise sitting, in the oil and gas industry, right? In this case, but of course across all industries. This is where you have the knowledge to go in and rethink how you can do things different and build those technology solutions. And that's why, for example, with Wood, we are teaming up with all the big technology software companies to build those domain solutions. So when you are an oil and gas company and you're going on your net zero journey, of course, you have a roadmap. We have a roadmap which is called SCORE. And then that will bring you to the 2050. Then you have the Envision. We will keep on measuring on real-time data. And then, of course, you need to have a number of technology, clean tech solutions that can help you to redefine your business going forward. So it is a super exciting journey that we are on. So when you said that companies are putting money aside, I mean, that is what we are seeing, and it's a big driver. There's a number of drivers that's important for this transformation, and that is investing. And we see a huge amount of investing going in now to the whole clean tech area. So I am very optimistic. I'm also realistic in the way that we are talking about. I mean, we are talking about transforming something that is historically, right?
Yeah.
But yeah.
But the momentum is there, and as behavioural change starts to, essentially, regardless of which industry we're talking about, every industry is a people business. Yes. Every industry, and if that behavioural change can be unlocked, then the momentum starts to flow, and then wonderful things can happen. Just what we're talking about here, would you want to just talk a little bit how that feeds into the more of a circular economy? It's something that we're very interested in. I'm sure you are too. And just to give listeners and viewers just a bit of a background. So the Ellen MacArthur Foundation said 45% of greenhouse gas emissions needed for net zero can be reduced through the pursuit of circularity. And of course, this is what we've just said about having an economic transformation on a holistic basis. It's not an add-on. It's not nice to have. You really have to go into the soil and plant the tree from the ground up, to truly transform exactly what's being doing. What are you seeing when it comes to these circular principles in terms of closing the loop on those hydrocarbon processes? Are you seeing a lot of progress there, or is that a few steps down the line in terms of widespread industry when it comes to closing the loop? Are they not quite there yet, or is there a lot of appetite?
I think there's definitely a transition going on, and it goes back to when I talked about that 2020 was the year where companies begin to understand how key this is. So they begin to work with a number of the ESG frameworks, and 2021 is where you start the measuring, and then you start really to rebuild your business. And going back to the SDG ambition, each of those ambitions that we have created, you literally go down to your point. You go down. You look at the ambition, then you look at how do you measure up against this ambition. Then you go down to the underlying business processes, process steps, and underlying data models, and underlying enterprise architecture. So I would say my advice to companies is that when you take sustainability from being something nice to have to become the core of how you run, design, go to market with your business, you automatically will shift everything in your business. And I see that happening now. It is going to take time because so I've been implementing SAP all over the world for many years, and this is, huge transformation project, right? This is what we are talking about here. We are talking about rethinking how the product should look like, rethinking how the supply chain should look like, rethink who do we do business with, don't we do business with.
Some of the energy companies in the Middle East that we talked to about this, they've thought about, we need to change our processes. They thought we need to improve our talent as well. We need the right brains behind us. We don't have those yet. They've thought that we need to improve our climate and our our green tech, and we need to introduce ESG. So it's not one of our pillars, it is our pillar. It's you know, it's the ethos of our company. But when I ask them about circular processes and closing the loop and making, you know, pushing more and more towards that idea of a circular economy and reducing water waste and reducing the general waste and packaging waste and things like that, then all of a sudden it starts to get a little bit unsure, and they're well, that's further down. So it seems that in this region, it seems that the idea of a circular economy is considered separate sometimes to the idea of ESG.
I think it has.
I don't know if that's something you've come across as well.
We are involved in a number of big circular economy projects all over the world. I think it's more what industry that you are in. I actually see it go very hand in hand, because what I see happening is that you go into a specific business area, business process area, and then you look through the whole thing across the goals and ambitions that is applicable for that process. Because if you don't, you need to go back and revisit it. I don't think you can. Of course, when you have a roadmap onto 2050, you are not going to do everything in year one. Of course not. You cannot, because there are things you don't even can't do yet, because it has.
Like you said, you don't know what you don't know.
Yeah, but I believe, and that's also my advice, is that when you start doing this, it's not like you just take. It's not like I wait with the circular economy to step two. No, that's not how I see it, not at all. I think circular economy is as well incorporated into this as the climate is. I want to point out one thing that I think, and I hope the world will speak much more about that they do today, is resilience. And resilience is an interesting thing. And I remember when the world closed down, I went, my husband and I, we left US and went back to Denmark, where I'm from, just to be there for a couple of months. And I was contacted by the Resilience Network and asked me, together with 30 other people, to be interviewed for the next couple of months, going through wave one of COVID. And the whole thing was around resilience. It was around. And I remember the first interview, we were interviewed once a week, right? And the first one I was thinking about, how is it, Anne, that you have never thought about the word resilience before, when you have been involved in so many big projects around the world, implementing technology and digital transformations? And but of course, resilience has to do with that something really uncertain is happening and we don't have the solution, right? So. And that's where the resilience happened. And I think that what COVID have learned all of us is that you can literally not start a project without having a resiliency incorporated into the way what you're going to build. So so my recommendation is that, and that's what we recommend from Wood's side to all our clients, is that when you start your net zero roadmap, you need to implement it with the resilient in mind. So we have something called adapt resilience. And it's interesting to think about it. What if COVID hit the world beginning of 2020? We had at that time, what if we had all the vaccines? For us to have been successful to really accelerate and scale out the vaccines quick enough, we should have had a resilient plan in place. So you can say, even, and I think, and I've been thinking a lot about that lately, even though you have a solution, what if you cannot scale fast enough because of the chaos that suddenly thing happened? And that's the resilient piece. So I think resilience shifts and resiliency. So we work with the resiliency, the resilient network, this whole thing about thinking about, and you saw it in Texas also, right? When something suddenly happened that is not planned to happen, and you don't know what to do, that is
where are the buffers? Yeah,
exactly right. So I think that is something that I would love that companies, when they now go on their big transformational net zero journeys, that they incorporate resilience into it. Yeah.
But also as much education as possible, because in order that in itself is that's an element of a security blanket, and that's what, as you said, you know, the circular economy and this broader shift with the energy transition really are the same thing. Yeah. But very much we come across people who think they're separate. Yeah. And that's where that's not to vilify anybody, that it's all part of the learning process. Everybody's learning, everyone's at different stages. You know, it's certainly not to demonize that situation at all, but there's an educational process that it's still very much ongoing. And like you say, the more greater your resilience, and then the greater your education as well, perhaps that they'll very much unite. I just want to pick up on something just before we wrap up. You're saying about 2021 is very much the year of measuring carbon. So what would you hope to see by the end of this year when it comes to companies? Again, these are huge generalizations. We're talking across the world. It's very difficult, but it's all taken with a you know, an asterisk of generalization next to it. But what would you hope to see by the end of this year when it comes to companies being able to monitor their carbon footprint? What would you hope?
So first of all, 2021 is, as I already mentioned, is a historical year for many reasons that already talked about. But we also have COP26 happening end of the year. And 𝗬𝗧𝗜𝗏 is a Scottish company, and we are going to have a big presence at COP. We're going to have a house there and I'm running
garden.
Yeah. I'm running something called OnCOP together with UN on Clubhouse, and 𝗬𝗧𝗜𝗏 is going to have this house in the OnCOP area, and then of course be in the blue and the green zone. And I think this year, what I expect to see of this year, I think the world expects to see of the year, and I'm sure it will happen, is that the acceleration that we have seen the beginning of this year, and I would say everybody watch this week, because with Joe Biden and this meeting that is going to take place, we will see so many announcements coming out this week, and it will just accelerate further into COP in November, the first 2 weeks of November. I think what we will see is carbon reporting will become a normality. It will be a practice that all companies be using. They are giving their commitment. Now they are reporting up against the commitment. And then we will see an acceleration in clean tech solutions that will begin to be implemented at companies. And we will see a solid roadmap built and governance structures. We will see we already see it in the talent market. We see how universities are ramping up skill set. We see how talent there's a big demand around people who know about this whole industry. It's like a whole industry that is being created, right?
Yeah.
That is accelerating. So a lot of people in any industries are talking about people who have knowledge around this. So I think 2021 is a year that will accelerate and make a good start into that we get to 2050. And it's interesting because I wrote this science fiction books for 2 years ago. I speak about scenario planning, everything. Scenario planning is becoming a normality to speak about because it's not a linear. This is not going to be linear. It cannot be linear, because it's a linear. We will not have what we need in 2050, right? Mm-hmm. So it's going to be acceleration after exponential, again and again and again. So I think COP26 will be a place that will be product launches. It will be physically things that we will see. It will be transformations that has happened. So I think we are off to a really, really good start. Yeah.
Okay, so for the rest of this year, we've got COP, we've got clean tech, we've got talent development, we've got better carbon monitoring, which is very exciting because we've been talking about that a long, long time. And talent. Have I mentioned talent as well? Yeah. So yeah, we've got quite a few areas, key areas to be watching out for the end of the year. And it'd be wonderful if you were able to join us again and we could review what state of the world is at, perhaps around COP, see how you're fixed. I imagine it's going to be very, very busy where you are, but see how you're fixed. It'd be wonderful for you to join us again and give us your insights. Thank you very, very much for today.
Thank you so much for the opportunity. Thank you.
Thank you. Bye.